My cousin's husband had just asked if I still needed help writing resumes. He was smiling when he said it. One of those slow, deliberate smiles people wear when they think they're being kind and superior at the same time. I heard you're looking at the mall. That little place with the shoe store? His wife, my cousin Andrea, tilted her wine glass, not drinking, just swirling. There's a kiosk there that sells scarves. You'd be great at that. You have a calm presence. My sister laughed, hand resting lightly on her thigh. That delicate way she always sat, like someone was watching, even when no one was. Sam's always had a gentle touch. She just needs the right environment. Aunt Denise looked pleased with the direction of the conversation. Exactly. Somewhere with structure, predictability. That's good for healing. I was sitting 2 seats down from my father, Randy. He hadn't spoken yet. He was waiting. He liked to be the one who delivered the final line, the definitive judgment. Across from me sat a man in a navy blazer, introduced earlier only as Ken from the city, a friend of Andrea's husband. Clean haircut, posture too perfect for sales or tech. Nobody explained what he did, but I knew. We were in the dining room of a beige 2-story colonial with brick accents and pride flags in the flower beds, crystal bowls, 2-bite desserts, wine chilled to the correct temperature. Suburban Chicago, everything curated to feel safe, neutral, correct. I had arrived late, as instructed. 6:15, not on the dot, Andrea had texted. That way you're not first. The tone wasn't unkind, just strategic. The way people speak when they've stopped pretending they're happy to see you and started pretending it's your idea. Inside, there were 8 place settings, even though there were 9 people. I stood in the entryway long enough to feel it. The shift when people pretend not to notice you arriving. The way they hold on to their sentence a little longer than necessary. Then let it go. I wore a black blouse and slacks. Neither expensive nor cheap. Clean lines, my boots were polished, my hair was pinned up, minimal makeup, no jewelry. I brought nothing with me. Dinner was already on the table. Steak, potatoes, green beans laid out in careful symmetry. My cousin's husband, Dan, hovered by the grill like it was a control panel. Randy sat at the head of the table, arms stretched out, thumbs hooked into his belt loops. "You're back in town," he said after a few minutes. "How long this time?" "Just passing through," I replied. "That what you're calling it now?" Ken chuckled. The kind of chuckle that wants to be included. I didn't speak again. I reached for the water glass. Crystal stemware. Cold. Dan poured red wine into his own glass, filled it too high. He drank like a man trying to forget the conversation his wife had warned him not to have. "So, Sam, you working again?" "She's looking," Andrea answered for me. "There's a place near the outlet mall that has flexible hours." "That's great," Aunt Denise said, nodding. "Every little bit helps." "She was in recovery," my sister added, like it was a footnote. "So the transition's going to take time. We're all just grateful she's doing better." My father laughed, not loudly, but with a depth that filled the room. "She's not in recovery. She's in records, government job, clerical, I think. Right, Sam?" The silence stretched a moment too long. Then came the laughter, mild, controlled. The laughter of people who wanted to stay on his good side. I cut a piece of steak, chewed, swallowed, didn't respond. Ken leaned forward slightly. "So what do you actually do? Like filing, digitization, that kind of thing?" I didn't answer him either. Randy looked around the table. "She used to have ambition, ROTC if you can believe it, but then she got quiet, dropped off the map for a while. Couple of years ago, she showed up out of nowhere, cleaned up, didn't say much, took some job down in Springfield. State records or something. Nobody challenged it. Nobody asked me directly. That was the pattern. Build a version of me that made sense, tolerable, dismissible. Outside, a car engine stopped, then another, then another. The window behind me showed a narrow view of the street, trees, brick mailbox, 2 kids on bikes slowing near the curb. Then the first vehicle appeared. Black SUV. No markings, no noise. It rolled to a stop behind Andrea's sedan, then the second, then the third. Each vehicle identical. Glass so tinted it looked like obsidian. No license plates, just diplomatic tags and mirrored finish. The lights on the front grille weren't flashing. They were pulsing, blue and red alternating in a silent strobe. Inside, no one moved at first. Then someone, Dan maybe, stood and went to the window. "Is someone expecting guests?" Andrea followed. "That's not normal." Aunt Denise was already pulling out her phone. "Don't," I said quietly. She didn't hear me. The man in the blazer stood. Ken. His expression had changed, not confused, calculating. He walked slowly to the window and looked out. "That's federal," he muttered. "Or higher." "Higher than federal?" Andrea laughed, but it didn't land. The doorbell didn't ring. No one exited the vehicles. They just sat there, engines idling so low they made no sound at all. Randy leaned back in his chair. Well, what's going on, Sam?" His voice had shifted, mocking but wary underneath. I didn't answer. Ken looked at me now, really looked. His hand went to the inside of his jacket, then stopped. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was checking credentials, access. Then he did something no one expected. He picked up his fork and tapped it gently against his glass. It rang once, high and clear. Everyone turned. Then he said, "May I confirm something with you?" I looked up at him. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small flat device, black, no logo, and tapped twice on the surface. A screen lit up. He turned it toward me. It showed a sequence, a pattern of symbols, an encrypted interface only visible to certain eyes. I didn't look at the screen. I rolled up my sleeve, just enough to expose the mark beneath. It wasn't a tattoo, not in the ordinary sense. It shimmered with layered pigment, light reactive, coded in a way that couldn't be faked or fabricated. Ken's breath hitched. He stepped back so fast his chair toppled. He dropped to one knee, hands at his sides, voice low and measured. "Commander Spectre Actual, awaiting your orders." The silence that followed had weight. Andrea's mouth opened, closed, opened again. My sister dropped her fork. Dan muttered, "What the—" Randy stood. "What the hell is this?" Ken didn't look at him. He stayed low, his eyes fixed on me. "Perimeter has been established," he said. "Alpha and Bravo teams on standby. Aerial surveillance is already live. Your last beacon ping placed you 3 clicks south. We have confirmation." I nodded once. "Hold position," I said. "Do not enter unless signaled." "Copy that." The agents outside didn't move, but I saw it. A shift. The readiness posture dropping into defensive cover. Inside, no one was speaking. Randy was the first to break it. "You think this is funny?" he snapped. "Some kind of prank?" No one answered him. Ken finally rose, straightened his blazer, pulled a thin badge from his pocket and placed it on the table. It bore no name, just a seal, and a designation that none of them understood, except me. I stood, folded my sleeve back down, took a sip of water. Randy opened his mouth again. "You going to explain this?" "No," I said. I looked at him the way I used to look at maps, not with anger, with accuracy. He was smaller than he used to be, or maybe I'd just stopped shrinking. Nobody spoke, the kind of silence that isn't peace. Its structure collapsing, a soundless implosion. Ken retrieved his badge. His hand didn't shake, but his voice had changed. He wasn't trying to command the room anymore. He was waiting. His authority didn't matter here. Randy glanced at Andrea, then Dan, then me. "Sam," he said, voice too casual, "this has gone far enough. You've made your point." I turned my head slightly. He stepped toward me. I said enough. Ken blocked him. One hand, open palm. No aggression, just precision. "Sir," he said, "do not." Randy's jaw moved, but the words never came out. His shoulders squared, a performance he used when someone questioned him in public. But this wasn't his audience, and he wasn't in control. "I'm her father," he said finally. Ken's response was even. "She outranks you." There it was, spoken out loud, not a hint of apology. Dan backed up. Aunt Denise looked confused, then embarrassed. My sister had stopped blinking. Ken turned toward me again. "Commander, our perimeter is clean. The safe house has been prepared if you wish to relocate." "Negative," I said. "Maintain observation. No relocation. Not yet." He nodded. Confirmed. Eyes on. Behind him, the room remained still. I walked back to the table, picked up my glass, took another sip. My hands were steady, my breathing even. My father hadn't sat down. I looked at him once, directly. He didn't hold my gaze. His eyes went to the mark on my forearm, now visible again under the edge of my sleeve. He knew what it meant now. Not the details. He'd never get those. But the shape of it, the implications, the distance. "That's not real," he muttered. "That's not possible." Ken tapped something on his comm. "Command is requesting location confirmation. Do you want the beacon updated?" "Send full telemetry," I said. "Attach ID verified signature. No filters." "Copy that." In the corner, my sister finally spoke. "This is insane," she said, voice tight. "You're pretending to be what? Military?" I didn't answer. She turned to Randy. "Dad, tell her to stop." He didn't. His hand was clenched around the back of his chair, knuckles white. "She's been lying to us for years," Andrea said. "We helped her." No, Ken said. "You didn't." They looked at him. "You helped a version you were comfortable with. Not the one sitting here, and not the one who kept your names off certain lists." He didn't say it with cruelty, just with fact. "Excuse me," Aunt Denise said, regaining some of her voice. "Are you saying she's... what exactly? Some kind of secret agent?" Ken didn't reply. He just stood at attention. The answer was louder than any explanation. Dan picked up his wine glass and drained it. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't need to," I said. And they didn't. They didn't need to understand how many nights I'd spent underground, waiting for a call that wouldn't come. They didn't need to know the number of times I'd been the last voice someone heard before the extraction failed. They didn't need to know how much blood fits in a tactical glove, or how long it takes a body to cool in transit. They didn't need to know what Spectre meant, or why the call sign had been retired once, then reactivated, only that it wasn't something I'd invented. Ken spoke again. "Do you want me to brief them?" "No." That startled him more than anything. "Ma'am, they're not a priority." "Understood." Randy cleared his throat. "So what? You're... what exactly? Intelligence? Special forces? FBI?" I said nothing. The silence wasn't avoidance. It was structure. He kept going. "You show up here, in my house?" "This isn't your house," Andrea said automatically. Randy looked at her. That wasn't the answer he'd expected. Not now. Andrea's voice wavered. "I just mean, legally, it's... you invited her," Ken said. "To a meal designed to humiliate her. That part is clear." My sister scoffed. "She's always playing the victim." "No," I said. "You just prefer me that way." That ended it. No shouting, no correction, just that. Ken's comm crackled faintly. He stepped away, listened, nodded, then turned to me. "Commander, Command confirms verification. They also confirm the operation window is closed. Debrief will be rescheduled. Your discretion." Good. The rest of the table watched like spectators at a play they hadn't auditioned for. "You were in recovery," Aunt Denise said again, weaker this time. "The family said you were..." "They said what they needed to," I said. Andrea spoke softly. "You let us believe it." I didn't respond. That wasn't the question they were asking. Not really. They wanted to know how long I'd known they didn't believe in me. They wanted to know how long I'd known they weren't safe. My father sat, finally. Not because he wanted to, because standing took effort. He looked at me across the table. The room had changed. He was still trying to find the corners. "You left," he said. "You just disappeared. No one knew where you were." I thought about the convoy in Sarajevo, the 3-day blackout in Morocco, the blood trail in Montenegro, the children we evacuated in silence, the names I had signed off on, the ones who didn't make it, the intelligence I'd buried beneath a cover so bland no one ever questioned it. I'd disappeared into places he couldn't pronounce. And now I was standing in his dining room. He picked up his fork, then set it down again. "Why now?" he asked. The lights from outside pulsed faintly through the windows. My sleeve was still rolled up. Ken's badge still lay on the table. "Why come back?" I didn't answer, not because I couldn't, because the question revealed too much about what he thought mattered. In his mind, power needed an audience, and I hadn't performed for one, not until now. Andrea poured more wine with a trembling hand. It spilled slightly. No one cleaned it up. Dan stood. "I'm going outside." Ken stopped him with a glance. "Perimeter is live. Do not exit the property unless cleared." Dan sat back down. My sister crossed her arms. "So what? This was all fake? You lied to us? Let us think you were broken? Addicted? In need of help?" "You never asked," I said. "I asked," she snapped. "I asked how you were." "You always brushed it off. You were cold." "I was working." She didn't understand. Of course not. She thought work was a resume, a paycheck, a place you went and came back from. She'd never stayed awake in a hostile zone, listening to comms from 4 teams at once, knowing only 2 had a safe route out. She thought broken looked like silence. She didn't understand it could also look like competence. Andrea whispered something to Dan. He shook his head. The man in the blazer, Ken, stood straighter. "Commander, with your permission, I'll relay the stand-down order to Alpha and Bravo." I nodded. "Done," he said after a pause. Randy rubbed his forehead like he had a headache. The silence returned. This time it wasn't confusion, it was recognition. My sleeve was still rolled. I didn't cover the mark. I let them see it. Not for approval, not for forgiveness, just so they knew what they'd misjudged. Ken turned slightly. "We'll maintain light cover through the night. Debrief will be initiated on your command." "Understood." He paused. "Is there anything else you want them to know?" "No." I stayed for the pie. Andrea brought it out in silence. Store-bought crust. The kind that tries to taste like homemade, but doesn't. She placed it in the center of the table like it was still a normal night, like sugar could cover anything. No one moved. Dan stared at the floor. Aunt Denise folded and refolded her napkin. My sister leaned back, arms crossed, head tilted in that way she used when she thought she had nothing left to lose. "Are you going to explain any of this?" she asked. I didn't answer. She laughed, short, brittle. "You show up with a military circus, act like we're beneath you, and now you're just going to sit there and eat pie?" I looked at the pie. "I didn't ask for it." Andrea blinked. "What? You offered it. I didn't ask." Randy pushed back his chair. The legs scraped the hardwood like something being dragged too far. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "You always did." He opened his mouth, but Ken spoke first. "Commander," he said, stepping closer, "requesting permission to relay public optics protocol." I nodded once. He tapped his comm. "Proceed with standard exposure. 10%. Limited local awareness." Outside, the street came alive. Not with noise, not chaos, precision. 2 agents stepped out of the nearest SUV, black fatigues, no names. One of them carried a long case, the kind that could be anything. Neighbors began to emerge, first from the porch across the street, then from windows, then from driveways. Phones lifted, lights shifted, no sirens, no instructions, just presence. The kind of presence that rewrites memory. Inside, Aunt Denise finally found her voice again. "Is this really necessary?" "Yes," Ken said. My sister stood. "You're using us." I looked at her. She faltered. You used me for years, I said quietly. You just used smaller tools. Andrea cleared her throat. Sam, we didn't know. You should have said something. We thought you were in treatment. You were told that, I said. She looked at Randy, then away. The lie hadn't been hers. Not originally, but she hadn't questioned it either. I stood. Ken moved aside instinctively. I walked to the window. The SUVs were still idling. One of the agents spoke into a shoulder mic. The other stood facing the house, not guarding, not threatening, just waiting. A woman I didn't recognize stood at the end of the driveway with her phone raised, flash off, but recording. Behind her, a boy on a scooter had stopped moving, just stood, foot down, watching. Do they know who you are? Dan asked. His voice was quieter now. They know enough. Randy stepped toward me. What does that mean? Ken placed a hand on his chest. Not hard, just enough. I need you to stay where you are, he said. You can't touch me, Randy said, puffing up like it still meant something. I didn't, Ken said. My sister moved toward the door. Ken blocked her too. Unless you're instructed otherwise, you're not to exit the premises. This is our house, she snapped. It's a scene. She turned to me. You planned this. I didn't answer. I walked to the table, picked up the folder Ken had set down earlier, unsealed it. Inside were orders, redacted in parts, clearance levels, deployment codes, operations tagged under different countries, different names. I turned it toward her. Her face paled. Ken tapped his comm again. Confirmation received. Rear assets have arrived. Civilian optics at 23%. Block secured. Andrea backed away from the window. This is insane. This is our neighborhood. These are our neighbors. They'll remember it differently, I said. How? They'll tell themselves the story they can live with. Dan leaned forward. And what story is that? That someone important came home. Ken handed me a phone. Secure line, he said. Command is ready. I didn't take it. Later. He nodded and stepped back. Aunt Denise broke the silence next. We loved you, Samantha. I looked at her. I don't need that, I said. Not anymore. She flinched like I'd struck her. My sister exhaled sharply. You're heartless. No, I said. Just done. Randy turned to Ken. I don't believe any of this. I don't believe she's who you say she is. Ken didn't respond. I walked to the fireplace. Above it, the mantel held photos. Graduations, vacations. Randy in front of the Grand Canyon. My sister with a diploma I'd paid to print. Andrea's baby shower. A Christmas morning with everyone but me. I picked up the one with Randy at his company's 20-year anniversary. The plaque in his hand. The smile of a man who believed he'd earned something permanent. I set it down gently, face down. Why didn't you tell us? Andrea asked again. Why keep us in the dark? Because it was safer. For you? For the country. Nobody had a response for that. Ken tapped his earpiece. Commander, the Admiral is en route. Estimated arrival in 6. Randy laughed. It broke something in the room. That brittle tension cracked. You're expecting us to believe an Admiral is coming here? He looked around for support. He found none. I sat back down. I picked up my fork. Ken stood at ease, waiting. The front door didn't knock. It opened. A man stepped in, dress blues, medals, hat tucked under his arm. He paused, took in the room, then spoke. Commander Spectre Actual. I stood. Vice Admiral Kincaid, Ken said, saluting. The Admiral nodded, then looked at me. Orders are suspended, he said. You're authorized for extended personal leave under Executive Clause 6-1. Understood. He looked around the room, then back at me. Are you ready? Not yet. He didn't question it. He stepped aside and waited. The others didn't speak. Randy had sunk back into his chair. Andrea had stopped crying, but her face was blank. My sister stood stiffly like she'd forgotten how to sit. Ken turned to me again. Ma'am, perimeter will hold for as long as necessary. I won't be long. I looked around the room once more. This was where the lie ended, not with confrontation, not with apology, just with recognition. "I'm not here for you," I said. "I'm here because it was necessary." Dan whispered, "Necessary for what?" "For them to know." Ken opened the door wider. I stepped through. The air outside was cool, the neighborhood silent. Mrs. Higgins stood on her porch. She waved. I didn't wave back. The convoy didn't leave in a rush. It moved with purpose, slow enough for the neighborhood to watch, fast enough to leave no questions. Engines low, doors sealed. The silence behind it didn't fill. It stayed open. From the back seat of the third SUV, I watched my reflection in the tinted glass. Not the face they remembered, the one they built stories around. This version didn't require their belief. Vice Admiral Kincaid sat beside me. He didn't speak, and I didn't offer anything. Outside, a few children waved. Their parents pulled them gently back. At the stop sign, the lead vehicle paused longer than necessary, not for traffic, for control. Then we turned. One street, then another, then out of sight. It would take Andrea's neighborhood 3 days to explain what had happened. By then, the story would have already started to shift. By the weekend, it wouldn't even be about me. It would be about how close they'd come to something powerful. At O'Hare, the convoy split. One unit returned to base. The second rerouted to D.C. I took the third. Destination classified. Travel silent. No bags, no tags, just orders. I slept on the flight, not deeply. The kind of sleep that's more discipline than rest. The body pausing without trusting the pause. When I opened my eyes again, it was dark. The landing strip was bare, no markings, no lights, just dust rising beneath the wheels as we touched down. A car waited, no driver. I got in. 34 minutes later, we arrived. Secure facility. Exterior disguised as a corporate park. Interior all concrete and clearance. They took my credentials at the gate. Not to verify me, to update the system to my presence. Inside, a woman with short hair and a scar along her chin handed me a sealed envelope. Final debrief, Level 7, General Vance at 0900. Copy. She didn't ask questions, neither did I. The hallways here didn't echo. I found the assigned room, no number, just a code. Inside, a bed, a chair, a desk, bolted to the floor. I sat. The envelope was thick, paper only, no digital trail. I opened it. 2 operations marked closed, 1 marked postponed. No new assignments. I flipped to the last page. Commendation recommendation. Tier 1. Below it, a note. Pending approval. Physical presentation scheduled for Monday. Civilian presence authorized. 1. I folded the paper and placed it in the drawer. Slept again. Better this time. The auditorium was cold. Polished steel walls. Rows of chairs in 2 colors, dark gray for military, light gray for civilians. I wore dress uniform, pressed, clean, medals aligned, boots polished until the seams disappeared. General Vance stood at the podium, 2 stars on each shoulder, a voice like gravel. "Service is sacrifice measured in silence," he said. "We recognize the ones who carried weight in shadows." My name wasn't called first, or second, but when it was called, no one looked surprised. They stood, not for applause, because protocol demanded it. I walked to the front. He pinned the medal himself, didn't speak, just nodded. I nodded back, then turned. In the civilian section, 1 seat was filled, 2nd row, a crooked tie, thin hands resting on the arms of a borrowed jacket. Grandpa Joe. He didn't wave, just gave me the smallest nod, the kind that meant everything had landed exactly where it should. No one else from my family came. They weren't invited. They didn't even know. After the ceremony, I found Joe near the exit. "You made it," I said. He smiled. "Got the train, got a cab, got here early." Still stubborn. Still right. We sat on a bench just inside the security wall. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at the medal. "You earned it," he said. "I earned a lot of things." He nodded. "I know." I handed him a card. Inside was a clearance number. Temporary. One-time use. "You can call me on this line if you need to." "I won't need to." I smiled. "I know." He stood, touched my shoulder, then left. That was the last time I saw him. Later that day, I checked my personal phone. One message from Randy. "We just want to understand. Please call. We can fix this." I stared at the screen. The words were simple, but the tone wasn't. They didn't want me. They wanted proximity to something they'd underestimated. They wanted to make sense of power they couldn't control. I deleted the message, turned off the phone, placed it in the drawer next to the envelope. Back in operations, I found my team. None of them said anything when I walked in. They didn't have to. They had seen me in the field, covered in sand and blood, making decisions at altitude, counting seconds between calls that never came. They knew who I was. They knew the call sign before they knew my name. Spectre. Actual. I sat down, boots on the floor, hands steady. We had work to do. That night, I checked the civilian net. A few mentions of the convoy in Chicago. Photos, mostly blurry. Speculation. One headline asked, "Was a foreign dignitary in Illinois this week?" No names, no confirmation. Exactly as planned. But in one image, half-shadowed, poorly lit, you could just make out my face in the reflection of an SUV window. The caption read, "Unknown woman exits vehicle. Possibly security staff." I closed the article. 3 days later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a letter and a photo. The photo was old. Me, age 12, at the range with Grandpa Joe. He was holding the rifle. I was watching his hands. The letter was short. "Knew you'd find your mark. J." I folded the photo, placed it in the top drawer of my locker. That night, I slept. No alarms, no orders, no family watching, just quiet, not peace, but something close. In another part of the country, my sister would be telling the story again, how the family black sheep turned out to be some kind of secret agent, how no one had seen it coming, how she, of all people, had known something was different. I didn't mind. Let her have the spotlight. Let her perform. She'd talk about the night the SUVs came, how her father had looked small for the first time, how the pie had gone uneaten, how no one could forget the moment a man in uniform had called her sister Commander. She'd tell it to friends, to neighbors, to anyone who'd listen. She'd call it the family story. Let her. That was her reward. Some stories don't end with reunions. Some don't end at all. They just shift into clarity, into silence, into distance earned. Thank you for reading with care. What stays with you after this story ends? You're welcome to share a thought, or not. If you'd like to read the next story, I'll be here.